in order to save our neck, in a way. The audience are coming. After a while, they probably will take over. So why don't you befriend them? Take them side by side, let them work with you. We can do something together. Leave me alone, please. I have a family. I would like to feed them. So we created a number of articulations around that concept, which turned it to something slightly different from what other people started before. I believe, for example, that Abdul Wahab Mutawa, the late Abdul Wahab Mutawa of Al-Ahram, created a fantastic interactive half-page on Al-Ahram newspaper that embodied the concept earlier on, but it was not as interactive. Nevertheless, it was user content that is being polished and used and repackaged in a way that you would enjoy, especially when you see the Friday edition, when all the ramblings of a user who probably doesn't know how to tell a story turns into, I lived in Saudi with my husband for 20 years. We had 2 lovely daughters, and every day I would wait for him, and so and that becomes a story. And he created a number of books out of that, and it was a very engaging content. So that was different. That was another way of doing it. That was a debate between an Alexandrian Egyptian and an Israeli girl from Tel Aviv, I think, at the time. And they engaged around the issues that sort of lots of people are debating around, but it was creating a platform whereby people can have a rational debate, and they tended to correspond, and we published their correspondence. And of course, there is a lot of effort done to curate that type of content, because you need to find the right people who can be speaking at reasonably good levels, and at the same time have a narrative or discourse that can be beneficial to others. And that was one way of doing that. And of course, we did it also with images. People were sending pictures from their localities, showing their own worlds. And later on, we did also some workshops where we were teaching young girls between the ages of, I think, 12 and 15, how to tell a narrative about their lives. And it was fantastic work done in Yemen and in Syria and in Egypt and I think 5 different countries. And the stories were extremely engaging, of very young and sometimes very poor girls telling about the stories of their lives and what they do with their families. And then there was another evolution. And by the way, if you can search socialnomics on YouTube, they have a number of fantastic videos that have been produced around the new social revolution that we are going through now. And one of the very interesting and revealing figures that they put there, I'm not a numbers person, I hate numbers. I don't think they tell you all the story, but some of them can be good in telling you an aspect of it or getting you interested, and that was one of them. So they wanted to see how many years each platform or medium took to reach 50 million users. And allegedly radio took 38 years to reach 50 million. And then you had a number of these. You had TV, I think, taking 13 years. You had the internet taking 4 years. You had the iPods taking 3 years. And then you had Facebook taking only 9 months to reach 100 million, double the number. And it wasn't short when I was doing another one of these presentations that it became 200 million users in a year. So 4 times the number that radio took, 4 times the people that radio took 38 years to reach. And it was clear that we are now lowering the threshold of entry even much more. The threshold of entry, as I said before, became much lower because it was cheaper to access that game of interaction with the masses. But now it's not just cheaper, it's cheaper and easier. You needed a particular level of knowledge to be able to do that before, and I do believe that many of you would tell me after this lecture that my granny is now using Facebook, and my auntie who has never known how to operate a TV remote control now publishes pictures on Facebook and does this and does that. And that's the beauty of Facebook as a platform within a platform. It's easy to use. It's what you get is what you do, and what you do is what you get. It's very simple, and that lowered the threshold of entry much more and tapped into a need that existed amongst a very wide sector of the audience and became an interesting story to tell. But what's happening here is it's very interesting to sit back and reflect a little bit on that story. Because what you see, in my view, is a big battle on public information spaces that have been dominated for quite a long time by the mighty and big, and now it's the people's place. And as a professional, I had to sit with myself and say, it's either I understand it and work with them, or I'm out of it. Because if I don't, they will get me out of it. They are much more clever and much more intelligent and much more insightful collectively than most of the analysts and the pundits and the politicians that I interviewed in my life, and believe me, I interviewed many. And it doesn't get me excited anymore to meet a politician as much as I get excited when I do something with those people. And mind you, there is another tricky bit, which is that the technologist now is not working with me, because in the past I had control. When I wanted to create TV channels and newspapers, I would get them to sit here and tell them to do what I want them to do. Now they don't do that. They work with the people directly, and they are taking me out of the loop. Even the revenue cycles are excluding you now, and there is that big debate between various entities as to whether Google, by displaying the search results that have news and making money out of it, regardless to whether we work with them or not, are doing the right thing or not. That's a very interesting one, because there are lots of technical artifacts that are being created now, and the technologist is working hand in hand with the audience and the users to make their experience better, to make it easier for them to get the information they want, and to make it easier for them to repackage the information in interesting ways. And we have to question our role and how we are going to do it. Well, it's not the next century, it's this century, because I wouldn't be able to do something for the 22nd century. It's a little bit too early for me. Now, the speed of adoption is another interesting thing. Who has adopted this much more quickly and much faster? The user or the professional? I can tell you that I struggled in every single place to get professionals to adopt technologies. When I visited the BBC a long time ago, just before I worked in the BBC, the modus operandus of a broadcaster or a journalist is that they would stand like this, put their hands behind their back, and there would be a typist. And they would be saying fantastic things, and the typist would be typing. When I started working at the BBC, and in my desperate attempts to introduce computers, people had a psychological barrier, because sitting and doing a manual, tedious task, like moving your finger and typing a letter, is not something I'm created for. I'm an intelligent intellectual, I think, and when I think, I speak. I don't even write, because I'm not a writer, I'm a broadcaster. I dictate. And it was an agonizing experience to get people to write their own stuff, to access the system directly and create their own programs. At the same time, people adopted the technologies very fast. So it is not uncommon to come across journalists who don't use this thing, a computer or laptop, or it's, you see more users doing that than journalists that I have worked with. And interestingly, that has reflected on distribution technologies and consumption of information much more than production technologies. Meaning, most devices now can do everything, because users have forced that trend. They want to consume different types of information in different formats. They want to consume text, audio, video, anything. They want to chat, they want to communicate. And consequently, the industry responded to that by creating these platforms and these devices and these tools through which people can have a converged experience. On the production side, that does not exist yet. You'll still find people broadcasting for TV and radio and producing for print, and very few systems have tackled that. Very few systems have that converged experience where a journalist would sit. There have been attempts, still clunky, but there isn't that strong drive, unless we talk about money, when people start thinking, okay, I can use one journalist instead of 3. Let's do something. But that sort of collective desire to create that experience is not there yet, and consequently the technologies from the user end have converged to offer that experience, and from the production end they haven't yet. Now, the endangered species, Homo journalicus, or whatever you want to call him, is worried and anxious. And as I said, there have been lots of sort of reputation tarnishing techniques that have been used all the time to tarnish the user that we work with in order to prove to ourselves before anyone else that their content is not of any value, which is totally wrong. And it's a war, and I know who's going to win. And the more we adapt and adopt these different modes of thinking now, the better we are in terms of creating a homogeneous, cohesive, inclusive information environment that we can coexist in and work together in. There are still people, by the way, and I did run a session a long time ago. We had something called Arab Broadcast Forum. I was one of the co-founders with a group of friends from Abu Dhabi TV, and Al Jazeera didn't take part in this one, but Dubai TV was part of it, and Abu Dhabi, and so on and so forth. And in one of the big sort of sessions that we had and we turned into a TV program, I had a couple of bloggers who actually broke the myth that most anxious journalists have, that these guys are frustrated journalists. They would like to be professionals, but they don't know how to do it, so they create blogs. And I had a number of very well-known bloggers sitting there saying, actually, we don't care. We are not interested. We are here to articulate our views and speak and get people to listen to us and reflect, but we don't care. We are not part of any revenue generation cycle. We do not want to be journalists. Some of us got offers, and we're not responding to them. So that myth, that the sort of journalists, professionals are creating all the time to sort of contextualize that thrust that is coming from the audience is actually totally incorrect, including all the sort of reputation tarnishing techniques that have been used. Now, what is next? I told you about the technologists and what they are doing, and what you can see here is lots of people now have their own newspapers. This thing looks much better than anything that I could have designed with a designer. That's paper.ly, which with no effort, with zero effort from myself, turns my social activity, not the things that I do socially, but the things that people that I follow do, and creates a newspaper that is issued to people who follow me on either Facebook or Twitter, and it's automatic. Now, whether it's of value or not, it still is a credible offer that is there. There are some others that you can put a little bit of effort into creating, like Storyfy, which helps you aggregate content that can be turned into a story. So you need to put a lot of effort. And this is, again, this is the technologist working with the user, not with you. Still, there is something missing because, again, information consumption and production and distribution is not just about finding intelligent ways of doing that, and even though that I can tell you the technologist is very, very sophisticated, because what they are trying to do is to embody and capture the human experience and turn it into a piece of software. Yeah? And the more they do of that, there still is something left for us to do. When I went to Yahoo, the most important thing in Yahoo is called the front page. This is the page on which you latch as soon as you go to Yahoo or go out of your email experience. Now, for me to be able to get people to consume more of these pages to generate what we call in the industry as inventory, which are the pages that we sell, then I need to be able to get relevant content. Now, the technologists developed very sophisticated algorithms in order to be able to capture what you as a user like to see. So the machine will get you what you are likely to want to see. You like Layla Alwi, you will see more of Layla Alwi. You like sports, you will see. So your front page is different than mine. But still, there is something left for us to do, because when a revolution takes place, for example, then the journalist would know that this is something that nobody would want to miss, even though that in your previous history, you have never consumed a piece of politics. And this is why you need to have an editor sitting there, finding the things that, as an editor, from my own experience, I would want people to see. And this is why something like this would be even better. This is Global Voices, whereby editors would sit and use the content that exists there And that's a tweet that I had at the time about the disappearance of Wa'il Ghunim, and put it in the context of a story. So still, there is something that we can do together, provided that you understand where you sit in that equation and in that information environment, and where you want to go with your audience. Now, this is another experience that was called 710 Greenwich, and I'm going to skim through this very quickly, because that is another interesting experience of, that I went through in the BBC. That was in the beginning of 2010, and almost 1 year before the revolution. And the idea here was to try to create what has been, called the first ever integration of social media with traditional TV. And it's not about just the technical integration of using a couple of tweets or a couple of Facebook entries in a program. It was about creating an extended arm of production through your users. So it is not interactivity in the sense that people will be telling you your views and you integrate them. It's not about getting questions and answers from people. It is not about citizen journalism whereby you get people to report for you. It's about people working as producers with you and creating the content that you will work with them on, researching the topics, getting the interviews, challenging the users, and so on and so forth. And that was a program that was launched in the BBC in, I think, April 2010. And that was the last thing I did before I go to the BBC. And again, I go to Yahoo. And when we did it in stages. So there was an initial stage where that group of wise men thought and conceptualized the format and how the program would work. And then from the content that has been provided, the producers worked with us on creating the material and challenging the interviews. And then we had a pilot that was public, and then afterwards we launched the program. And that's what I call television 2.0. So technology, as Marshall McLuhan again said, is an extension of man or woman. But it's also about how you see this technology. Is it a support mechanism? Is it something that allows you to do things that you were not able to? Or technology in itself is the innovation that you are creating for people? And this is, I think, the question of the century from a professional perspective. And I think cracking this is what will make any one of us a good or a better journalist. Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes left for questions for those who are about to go to a lecture.